Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to this Zoom program of the Brahma Kumaris. And this program is in honor of the International Month of Women, which is March. So we're just getting in under the wire. And I'm very happy to welcome as our guest speaker this evening, my friend Vicki Garlick. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, I met Vicki last September when she was embarking on her Guinness record, which you'll hear all about tonight. She has a very eclectic background. The one thing that we connected on right away is we both have a passion for interfaith action, and we actually have been involved in the same interfaith initiatives in the past, although we didn't meet each other personally. But her specialty is children, is educating predominantly children in religions, world religions. And she has written books on this, and she gives workshops and presents at conferences and is involved in Christian communities on their education program. I said she was eclectic. She's an ordained Christian minister, and in addition to that, she has a PhD in psychology with two specialities. One is neuroscience, and the other is cognitive development. So quite a rich past. And as I said, we met last September when she was embarking on this Guinness World Record. And I admired her vision and her courage in what she was taking on. And so we kind of formed a spiritual friendship. And now today we're going to look back at what she experienced in September as she was pursuing this world record. What was the experience like for her? And also, what is it that she learned that we can all learn? So if you have any questions for her, you can write them in the chat, but I will ask a few questions. I have a few important questions to ask. So welcome, Vicki.
Thank
Welcome back to
you.
Chicago again.
Yes.
And
It was the perfect city to my Guinness World Record, I have to say. When all was said and done, Chicago was the perfect choice.
oh, good. So
Yeah.
this is, and probably Chicago was maybe part of the inspiration, but the first thing I think we all want to know about is what inspired you to leave your home for 1 month, to stay in strange neighborhoods, to figure out CTA, to run around every day in the rain and sun and wind and everything else, so that you could visit as many houses of worship as possible.
Well, you make it sound like it was quite the trek. Actually, September was also a great choice, and the weather was amazing. I have to wonder if I would have been able to achieve the world record if it had been raining every day. But I got really lucky on that part. It was sort of interesting because originally my inspiration was at the most basic level was that I thought I could do it. So I learned about the record initially through an article in Religion News Service, and it was established by a guy in India. He lived in New Delhi. And he established this new record and he visited 76 places of worship. So, you just do the quick math on that. That's two or three a day. And so, as soon as I saw the article, I looked at my husband and I said, very cavalierly, not knowing what I was talking about, I said, well, I think I could beat that. I had literally no idea what I was talking about, but that was initially what started it. And what I wanted to do really was to lift up religious diversity in America, right? And so I wanted to choose a place where I would be able to do that and be able to do that relatively easily. So I was looking at, I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I grew up south of Chicago in Kankakee, Illinois. And so I was looking at places like Atlanta, DC, New York City, and Chicago. For a variety of reasons, I ended up choosing Chicago. And part of it was one of the reasons was because there's an incredible amount of religious diversity in a relatively small area. And so that was initially what I was interested in. My other inspiration was also to lift up the importance of sacred spaces,
Basis.
and how important sacred spaces are to people. We're losing sacred spaces, some of them because of climate change, some of them because of wars, and we have a long history of losing sacred spaces to wars. And so this was a really good opportunity to just show people what sacred spaces look like across religious traditions and within religious traditions, and the importance of those sacred spaces for the communities who worship there.
So, and I know you have a lot of background in religious diversity. Was there anything new that you learned about religious communities in Chicago? Any new communities you discovered or new things you learned about communities you'd known about in the past?
Well, there were some really good opportunities for me. So, because I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's a the city of Asheville is probably about 105,000 people. But we have a fair amount of religious diversity here. We have a Shiva temple just outside of town. We have three synagogues. We have a Greek Orthodox church. So, I've been able to we have several Buddhist centers, probably about 4 or 5 Buddhist centers. So I was, able to experience lived religion in a variety of traditions. But the diversity, especially within traditions, there was just so much more of it in Chicago. And the place where I kind of saw it the most was in the Orthodox Christian tradition. So here in Asheville, we have one Greek Orthodox church, and I've been there on more than one occasion. But in Chicago, there are all kinds of different Orthodox churches, right? So there's Greek Orthodox churches and Ukrainian Orthodox churches, and there are Eastern Catholic churches. We don't have an Eastern Catholic church here in Asheville. And so I was not just able to visit those places of worship, but I actually, in the process of the month, I also attended about 20 worship services. And so I was able to go to a Saturday night vigil in a Greek Orthodox church. I also went to another Orthodox church where they speak Church Slavonic. So I didn't even know what Church Slavonic was. I had to come home and research it. And so, it was really amazing in that respect. I have some photos that I might, if we have time later, I can show them. But there was a Greek Orthodox church that just happened to be doing a blessing of the water ritual. And so I was able to go to that. And so I just was able to see so much more diversity. And again, that's what you expect in big cities in the United States. But this was an opportunity not just to experience it for myself, but to share that out and to share across religious traditions, but also within religious traditions.
So you mentioned the religious diversity in Asheville. When the Buddhist monks were walking to Washington, did they come through Asheville?
They didn't come through Asheville. They went a little bit east of Asheville. And so that was the way that their route took them. And so it didn't work out for me to go and see them. They were in a small town called Saluda. That was probably the closest they came to Asheville. But I knew lots and lots of people. There were lots and lots of people on Facebook friends in Asheville who were able to go out and see them and saw them when they were in South Carolina or saw them when they were in Eastern North Carolina. So there was a huge amount of support for them here in Asheville as well.
Yeah, good. So
Yeah.
tell me, so there definitely was a lot of diversity in your experiences in Chicago. What were some things that really stand out for you? It might be people you met, or it might be services that you experienced, or things you learned about religions. What really stand?
Yeah.
I'm sure you could talk
Well,
about that all night, but tell us a few.
I know there's sort of a lot of questions within that. So I think I need to tell a little bit of the story and what happened to me. So about 6 weeks, so every Guinness World Record has its own set of rules for that attempt. Okay. So, and there are like over 65,000 Guinness records, and there are several thousand a year that are approved by Guinness. So it's a big operation. And so I did not get the rules for my particular attempt until the end of July. And there were several rules. One was that I had to take a selfie at each place. That's fine. A time-stamped selfie. That was easy. Then I had to turn around and take a quick time-stamped video. And that was fine too. But then I also had to have someone at each place sign a verification form for me. So all of a sudden, things got a little bit more complicated. It wasn't just like walking by these places, right? I was going to have to find someone who could sign this verification form for me. And the final rule was that I was not allowed to use a personal vehicle. So that meant that I really needed to be on public transportation, right? I had to be on the L or I had to be on buses. So again, a really good reason why I picked Chicago. So I know that people in Chicago complain about the CTA, but I have really nothing bad to say about the CTA. It was a lifesaver for me. Um, so so I was going along, but what that meant is that I needed to set up appointments at these various places. So I spent the entire month of August frantically trying to set up appointments with people so they could sign my verification form. And I had appointments at probably about 85 or 95 places, right? So the original record was 76. And so technically 85 or 95 would have been enough, but life, right? People aren't going to be there. There's going to be miscommunications. So I was thinking to myself, I should probably try to get a few more. The last week of September wasn't worked out yet. Maybe could I maybe even get over 100? Like that might be kind of cool. So that was my mindset when I moved to Chicago. So I moved to Chicago. I stayed 2 weeks in Wicker Park, and then I stayed 2 weeks north of Chicago in Evanston. So I'm just going along. I started off downtown. I spent a couple days downtown. I spent a couple days in near North, which is just the North neighborhood in Chicago, and it was going great. Everybody was there. I'm just going along, and people are signing my form, and I'm starting to think, wow, is this too easy? Like, am I really just going to get 95? Well, the Friday of the first week, which was Friday, September 5th, I get an email from Guinness, and they tell me that someone else has already broken the record. And the new record now is 111. And so if I want to break the record, I have to go to at least 112 places. So that is not 85. That is not 95. That's not even 101. So it was Friday. There really wasn't much I could do. I went to my appointments on Friday and then I went home, back to my Airbnb, and I panicked for like, 17 minutes. And then I decided that I needed to do something different. So I had two appointments on Saturday and two appointments on Sunday. Well, that wasn't going to be enough. Like that was not going to cut it. So I'm thinking, okay, Saturday, 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 what can I do? And so it turns out who's in their place of worship on a Saturday? Seventh-day Adventists. So if you don't know anything about Seventh-day Adventists, they are a Christian denomination that tries to live as closely to the way they think Jesus lived, and Jesus was Jewish. So their Sabbath is on Saturday, and their church services are on Saturday. Now, I knew where they were. They were on my maps. I had emailed them in August. Nobody emailed me back. I had emailed them a second time in August. Nobody had emailed back. I had called them. No one had called me back. So they were kind of off the list at that point. But now, see, I was a little bit desperate. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my two appointments, and then I'm going to get on the L, and I'm going to go to these Seventh-day Adventist churches. They're going to be there, and I'm going to see, I don't know, see what happens. So that's what I did. I went to my Seventh-day Adventist church. During the week, it was called Epic Seventh-day Adventist Church. During the week, it's an art gallery. And on Saturday, they come in and they set up the coffee table and they create a sanctuary for themselves, right? So I didn't have a very good spiel at this point. I got a good spiel by the end of the month, but I show up and I just say, my name is Vicki. I'm here in Chicago. I'm trying to get a Guinness World Record. I need someone to sign this form. And the guy said to me, "Oh my God, that is so cool. We will absolutely sign your form. And there's two more Seventh-day Adventist churches. They're going to be there this morning too. You should go to those as well." So they signed my form. I took the L to the next place. They signed my form. I took my L to the next place. By that point, they were having church. I had to stay for the whole entire church service, went into the church basement for the potluck after, and they signed my form. And what that taught me that day, which was Saturday, September 6th, was that if I just showed up where people were, that they would open their door and they would be interested and kind. And from a purely logistical standpoint, they would also sign my form. And so that changed the entire attempt for me. Because from that point forward, what I did was I went to a neighborhood, I went to all the places where I had appointments, but before, in between, and after, I went to every other place in the neighborhood that had not gotten back to me. And that's how I ended up with 185 places. So, really, what ended up being the most amazing thing about this experience is that I learned that if you meet people where they are, they will open their doors, they will open their hearts, and they will be part of um, sort of humanity, and they will be part of helping me with my story and lifting up diversity. And so my original inspiration for it, right? My original inspiration was fine, right? Except that that is not what turned out to be the most inspiring thing about it, or the most life-changing thing about it, or in many ways the most interesting thing about it. So, so I had basically the highlights were all the people I met. Because in order to get 185 places, I had to get 185 signatures, which meant met at least 185 people.
Hmm.
And that was really what turned out to be so amazing about it. And people have asked me, you know, do you think you could go to New York City now and break your own record? And I absolutely think I could go to New York City now and break my own record because I know how to do it. I already know what the rules are and I know how to do it. But it would never, ever again be that experience.
Hmm. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
And
it
how
was
about
it was really amazing. And
um,
so that's now the lesson that one of the lessons that I share with people, right? And what I think is so important about um whatever you want to call it, multi-religious, inter-religious, cross-religious, whatever, you know, breaking down boundaries work, right? Is this idea of meeting people where they are and having that little bit of bravery and it does require a certain amount of bravery because every place of worship has security now, right? And so I was ringing the bell, literally ringing the bell, and they were looking at me on their security cameras and they were deciding that I looked like a safe person, right? So they would open the door to me. But it really was about going to where people are and not asking them to email me back, not asking them to call me back, not asking them for anything other than to simply be present and then be open.
yeah, and I think you really hit on an important point about any kind of friendship, but particularly reaching out to people from a religious community. Because as you mentioned, religious communities are sometimes under attack. And so they have to be security conscious.
Mhm.
And so I think the atmosphere around reaching out to strangers has changed quite a bit in the 40 years since I've been involved in interfaith. I started out in San Francisco, and the atmosphere was very open. Everybody was welcome, everybody met everybody else, everybody got together, everybody enjoyed each other's service, but it's a little bit different now. And so, would you say that there were some communities that you, who might have been a little bit fearful of you for good reason, and but they let you in, and then there was kind of a surprising cross-cultural connection, if you will. Any
Absolutely.
communities like that?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is that, and then I'll sort of wrap it up with I think is a really important point. So the first thing I'll say is that the synagogues were very wary. So there was a couple of synagogues that just said, no, we can't have people coming and we don't want to be participants in this. A couple of synagogues said you can come, but you cannot take picture, a video of the outside of the building. So you can take a picture of you in front of a sign, but that's it. So there was a lot of wariness on the part of Jewish synagogues, and I think we can sort of all understand where that's coming from. There is another example is the downtown Islamic Center, which is an interesting story. So there is an Islamic center in downtown Chicago, and the buildings are tall, right? So it's literally 5 floors, and first floor is the entryway. Then, like the second floor, I think it was the offices, and then the next 3 floors are prayer spaces, right? And so I had called them and emailed them. I mean, they're right in downtown Chicago, right? So I had called them and emailed them, and they said, well, you need to text Nadim and see if Nadim is going to be around. And I'm texting Nadim, and he's not texting me back. But he did finally text me back, and he said, yes, I will be here. I will be here. So I showed up at my assigned time. What I didn't know was that Nadim was in his office, and he must have had probably, I'm going to say, at least 2 dozen cameras, at least 2 dozen cameras. So he saw me walking up to the door. He let me in. I took the elevator up to his office, and he was very skeptical. He was just very skeptical of what I was saying. He didn't really, English is not his first language. He did not really understand what I was saying. I'm not sure he even knew what Guinness World Record was. Like, why would he know that? And so we sat and talked for a while, and he became a total convert. He's like my friend now. He was telling me about all the other masjids that I could go to. There was one that I couldn't get an address for, and so he couldn't get an address for it either. I ended up finding it and sending it to him, and he's like, I can't believe you found that masjid. You're so amazing. What you're doing is so amazing. And so that was an example where someone who really was very skeptical, and he acknowledged that. He said, I really didn't understand what you were doing or why you were doing it, but he said, this is amazing. And so that was a really fun experience as well. But also I heard people's stories. Like, people would tell, like, I went to a Greek Orthodox church, and this guy told me his entire immigration story of his family, right? So in some ways, people are always wary, but the most security I saw was in the synagogues and in the masjids. I would say they had the most security, and they were the most wary. But and my overall point around this is precisely why this work is so important, is because right now, let's just say, I don't know if we want to say the powers that be or the people that own all the weapons, right? This is the byproduct. It might be the plan that might be giving them too much credit, but it's definitely the byproduct, right? Is you keep people divided. And so this is what we constantly have to counter, right? We have to counter that narrative. We have to create these experiences and continue to create these experiences. Because this is the only way that we don't allow the powers that be to divide us. So this is sort of an aside story that's not about me, but we have one Islamic center here in Asheville. I have friends that go there to the masjid, and most of us may know that recently was the month of Ramadan, right? At our local Islamic center, they do iftars on Friday and Saturday nights. At big Islamic centers, they do iftars break fast every night, but here it's smaller. And so just on Friday and Saturday nights. So my friend calls me up a couple days ago, and she said, oh, I never told you what happened at the iftar at the Islamic center. And she said, we're all sitting there waiting to break fast. And she said, about 6 Jews just walked up to the Islamic Center. And I said, well, okay. I said, how do you even know they were Jewish? And she said, oh, because they had yarmulkes on. And I said, oh, all right. Well, that's a good sign. And she said, And no, they were just standing there. They were just standing there outside the Islamic Center because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to go. There is a women's entrance, there is a men's entrance at that Islamic Center. You need to take your shoes off. Jews wouldn't necessarily know to do that either. So they were just standing there. And she said, no one was saying anything. And so she said, I went up to them and I said, hi. And they said, we're Jews from here in Asheville, and we wanted to come. And someone told us that it would be okay if we just showed up. And so that is, and they came and they ate with everybody and they sat on the floor and they had iftar with everyone. And so this is what this idea where the powers that be try to keep us divided. This is what we have to counter. And my story is just one little story of me taking a month, and countering that in 185 different ways. But it's happening all the time, and we need to keep lifting up those stories, right? Because these boundaries don't really need to exist, right? I understand that people like to worship with people who have similar beliefs and similar rituals and similar practices, and that's fine. But there's no reason for those kind of boundaries to create division. And so, again, I think my story is just one version of that, and we need to keep lifting those stories up so that people feel like they can meet the other, so to speak.
Hmm. And it really is important that each one of these stories gets told. And it's such a beautiful story that you just told about the Jewish people coming. That takes a lot of courage also. And
Yeah, absolutely.
and it takes a lot of courage, and it also takes a lot of conviction in kind of the brotherhood of humanity. And
Yeah.
I know that following your visits in Chicago, there is a story in the Chicago Sun-Times, and I was really proud of the Sun-Times for doing that. But were there other ways where your story was publicized? Because it's really, and this is kind of why I invited you tonight, is because I really feel that these stories have to get out and people have to hear the story and understand and share it with others.
Oh yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been interesting. The Sun-Times did an article, Interfaith America, which is in Chicago. One of their staff reporters walked around with me for a day and she loved it. She's like, this is an amazing project. And so she wrote an article right away, like within the first week after I got back. There's a group at Muhlenberg College, and they have a little center there called Religion Wise. And so they do religious literacy and multi-faith work there. And so they have a podcast. So I was on the Religion Wise podcast. There's an online website called The Daily Good. And so three people from the Daily Good interviewed me, and then they wrote an article called 185 Doors to Find Myself. And so that was posted. And then they actually use AI. They use AI to then create different versions of the story. So they took that story and they just created a kid's bedtime story, and they created a story for teens. So the Daily Good's been really fun. I've recorded a podcast for Drop the Needle. He's also in the Chicago area. And so that is supposed to come out like in the next week or two. So hopefully he's going to do some good editing on that. But anyway, so yeah, and my local paper, Mountain Express, did an article. And so different people see it in different ways. And so I do feel like really super grateful that people have resonated with this project. Different people resonate with different aspects of it. But it's been really nice. It's been really nice that people have thought that people think it's a story worth telling and a story worth sharing. And it is kind of a good story, just the fact that the record got changed and all that fun stuff. But then the broader story too about meeting across perceived differences.
Yeah. Well, when that podcast comes out, you let me know, okay? And then I can share it with our students here.
Okay, sure,
Okay.
sure, of
So
course.
I just want to say at this point, Ankit, does anybody have a question, or if anybody wants a question, did anybody put something in the text in the chat?
No questions so far.
No questions so far. Okay. If you do have a question, You can put it in the chat and either I will see it or Ankit will read it. Oh, Rupali raised her hand. Did you want to ask a question, Rupali?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
First of all, thank you, Vicky, for sharing your incredible journey of visiting 185. I wish I was a part of it. It's very exciting. But the one thing I would like to ask you is that what is in this entire, I would say we do window shopping, hopping, whatever it is called. But you did like a religious place. Like I'm an architect by profession, so I would love to see these places from inside, from an architecture point of view. But my question to you is that is how what is the one common thing if you had to point out in across your visits to these different religions and cultures that you would like to highlight for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's so many things in there. So first of all, you say you would like to come. My husband actually came for the last 3 days. And so by then I was in really good walking shape because I was walking like, I don't know, 10,000 steps a day, right? So 4 or 5 miles a day. So he came and went around for the last few days and he's like, this is grueling. So I don't know if you would really want to be around. The architecture piece you would love because I saw these huge, right, these huge cathedrals, right? I went to 40 Catholic churches. I went to Catholic high school in Kankakee, Illinois. I always knew that Chicago was Catholic, but I'm not sure I realized how Catholic. So these huge cathedrals and these huge spaces, and I went to these little tiny churches, right? And some churches are literally one room. Or like the Kadampa Buddhist Center is in a like a strip mall, right? It's just a storefront, right? So it was just amazing. So the one piece that came out of it is no matter what the space looked like, right? No matter how old it was, no matter how new it was, no matter how much stuff it had, no matter how empty it was, the space was important to the people who worship there. Every single space was important to people who worship there. And because of that, it was important to me, right? There was no place that I went to where I looked at it and I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm glad I don't worship here. That never happened. But in part, I think the reason it didn't happen was because, people were showing me and the space and sharing it with me. And it was special to them, right? People would take me like down a hallway and around a corner to show me a picture of, the groundbreaking or to show me a picture of the one item that had been saved after the Chicago fire in the late 1800s, right? And so people were really interested in sharing how special and important their space was to them. So,
Thank you. And I think Puranam wants to raise a question also. Would you like to ask something? Puranam, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on mute. I was trying to come out of the mute. So
okay,
thank
ask
you.
it again now that we can hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask you a question. And thanks, first of all, for sharing your amazing experiences. I'm a newly joined Brahma Kumari meditation guy. I'm ardently following Sister Mary. So I have a question for you. So whatever we call cross-faith, interfaith, multi-faith, like you said, in these spaces, especially in the interfaith spaces, where focusedly traditions meet through the shared values rather than shared theology. No, so it's always about your traditions and how you are sharing them through the values. So since I joined Brahma Kumari and I'm noticing things and I'm learning things that I haven't been there before, so how do you see a contemplative tradition like the Brahma Kumaris contributing to the culture of inner peace, what do you call it, ethical leadership, and service? How do you see it?
How do I see it? Well, so I mean, I think that what the Brahma Kumaris do is super important, right? Because, that idea that peace begins with us, right? Peace begins at home. So for me, anyone who is working for peace, right? Who is working to break down boundaries, who is working to understand the other, who is working to help others simply be seen, right? That is good work in the world. And we need to keep doing that good work, however it looked for you, right? So I think there's a lot of ways to do that type of work in the world. And I think however you choose to do it is helpful. It's your drop in the ocean, and it's important, right? Because we can see what happens when people in power don't operate that way. Right. And so ultimately, it's going to be all of us, like down here on the ground, right? The grassroots, who continue to make connections, who continue to work for peace, who continue to work for justice. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I think doing that and doing something to that end is what's important, right? So I think interfaith, multi-faith work is great. I don't think that's the be all and the end all either, right? So I'm one of those people that, put good out into the world, however that looks for you. Put more love into the world, put more peace into the world. And certainly Brahma Kumaris does that. And that's what I love about them.
So I have a practical question for you. That was a good
Okay.
answer. So let's say I'm a Christian and I live in Chicago. And let's say in my workplace or in my building, there's people who I know a little bit who are Muslim or Sikh or Jewish. And I'd like to kind of initiate a spiritual friendship. How would I go about doing this? Are there any kind of first steps or any good approaches or any suggestions you could make? Maybe every one of us will be inspired to do this.
Well, so my first step is to so they're people too, right? So and you might have things in common with them that have nothing to do with religion, right? In fact, probably since we're all human, you will have things in common with them. So my approach has always been, right, to approach with kindness. The place from which you come is important, right? So if you come from a place of interest, compassion, kindness, and curiosity, that will come out, right? So there's one way to ask, like, what does the month of Ramadan mean anyway? Right? And then you can say, oh, so what is this Ramadan thing? Right? That's the same question, but you're asking it from a different place. And so from a place of curiosity is a good place to start, right? So if you start with not going by what you've seen on TV or what you've read in the news, although it's okay to ask about that too. I don't know. My husband says to me, I can't believe what you get away with asking people. And I think that's partly true. But I think the reason why I quote unquote get away with asking people questions like that is because the place from which I come is obvious, right? I'm really interested. And believe me, I have made mistakes. And I learn because people are like, yeah, you really can't do that. You don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, sorry. So, I mean, every place I've ever gone, every question I've ever asked, I mean, really, people love to be seen, right? People love to know that you're interested in them in any way. And you don't even have to ask about their religion. You can ask about their religion. But I think a lot of times, for example, for Sikh people, right? If you're wearing a turban, right, and someone sees you in the grocery store, I mean, I've watched people who literally go into a different aisle rather than have to cross paths with a Sikh person in a turban, right? So if you can if we all, just as individuals, can just move beyond that, right? That's important work. That's important work that we're doing. Those are important drops in the ocean. So, I say just go up and say hi, right? Ask them what they did last weekend, right? Maybe they went to the Gurdwara, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they went to the same festival that you went to. So the initial thing is to treat people just as humans because we're all fellow humans here. And the second thing is to come at it from a place of curiosity and genuine interest.
Thank you. Those are good guidelines for us. And
Thank
Pia has had her hand up for a while. Would you like to ask a question, Pias?
Oh, yeah, sure. So thank you so much. It was wonderful listening to you. I mean, yeah, your story is very inspiring and congratulations.
thank you.
And I'm from Chicago. I've been with the Brahma Kumaris for the last 17 years. And I have a school of my own. I teach art, and we started a nonprofit organization where we work on mental health through arts. And sometimes it becomes, and I teach many students, I teach art. Sometimes it becomes very difficult to raise the topic, to discuss the topic religion. So when we have exhibitions, and most of the time we use art as a method to bring the people together. That is one of our, motives. That's what we do. But me as a teacher, when I teach, I find it quite challenging because I don't know how it will be viewed, how it will be seen, especially by the parents. Children are very innocent. And but for so sometimes I wonder, like, is there a path? Do you have any suggestion? Do you think this can be spoken to people even who are very conservatives, like, I mean, how to talk? We don't know everybody, right? And how it will be taken. Even schools, they don't talk about religion much.
Well,
Could I piggyback on that question? Because
sure.
this is one topic that I wanted to bring up, which I think is of interest to everyone. And that is because you have a lot of background in teaching religion to children. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, definitely answer Pias's question, but also for all of us, that's a really big, wide open, important area which hasn't gotten a lot of attention. So,
Yeah.
not just she's not talking about teaching, she's talking about just conversation, but also how do we approach that topic of how to discuss religion with children?
Yeah. Phew. So, one of the things, so yeah, mostly what I do, my company is called World Religions, the number 4, World Religions for Kids. And so that's really how I started out, teaching kids about the world's religions. And the Guinness Project was sort of a side project, a fun thing to do. Um, and so part of what I do is I go around and teach teachers in public schools how to teach kids about the world's religions. So the first thing I'll say is that it is actually constitutionally appropriate and allowed to teach about the world's religions in public schools in the US. And so I teach teachers how to do that because you can't support a religion. You can't make fun of someone else's religion, but you can teach about the world's religions. So, and I've been doing this now for I don't know, probably about 15 years teaching kids about the world's religions. And kids are so easy, right? And kids have a lot to say. Kids have a lot to say. So in your situation, you're talking about doing art projects with kids, right? And you're getting kids from a variety of a cross section of American culture, right? Which includes a variety of religions, naturally, right? And so what I would say is to I think kids need to be seen, right? They need their identities to be seen and to be acknowledged, right? And so I would come at it from that perspective, right? What do they have to say about their art? What is their art? What are they trying to say through their art? And where is that coming from? Is it coming from their culture? Is it coming from their family situation? Is it coming from their religious tradition? Is it coming from the sports that they're interested in? So I think we tend to get very uptight around religion. And I understand that. There are reasons for that, but I don't think we necessarily have to be that uptight about religion, especially when it comes to kids, right? If you come at it from just this idea that religion is one of the intersectionalities, right? It's one of their identities, right? What do they want to say about that? And what is important for them to be seen about that? And I think if you come at it from that perspective, and you're not pushing anything on these kids, and you're not pushing anything on anybody else who comes to look at this art, right? So what I would suggest is there's no reason to be defensive about that. Just know that, right? You just know that. And that's where you come from, and you feel confident about what you're doing and why you're doing it that way. And you are always coming from a place of wanting to have this experience be a great experience for the kids, right? So if you come from that place, then I'm not saying people won't give you pushback, and I'm not saying people won't say things, but that's the place from which you come, and you don't have to argue about it, and you don't have to defend it. You can just say, this is how we support the kids in our art program, and that's real and that's true, and that's good work in the world. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question in any way?
Yeah.
Do you want to
Sure.
share? If you want to share a specific example, we can do that too, or we talk later.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. I don't know. So Mary, should I show a few of the pictures and some of the things I learned?
Yeah, let's do that. If that's okay, if anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat, but I would love to see your pictures, and I think everybody else would also.
So I just pulled together a couple of pictures. I'm going to try to share my screen. We'll see how it goes. But there were several things that I learned, and these are just sort of representative of a couple of the lessons that start sharing screen. What's it doing again? Okay.
We'll all be peaceful for a moment. Oh, and look, it already came.
There you go. All right. So of course I started with my picture with Mary. So I was so happy to meet Mary. We had such a wonderful time talking about our old interfaith colleagues who we've known for a long time, and also they are old now. So anyway, that was one of my highlights. But this picture that I wanted to show you. So this place was amazing. This is Buddhist Temple of Chicago. And I went there on a Saturday afternoon because I saw on their website that they were having some sort of a social club meeting at 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. And of course, I had emailed them and called them, and I never heard back from them. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just show up at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon for this social club meeting. So I get there early, like 10 to 1, and there's this small Japanese woman who's moving this huge gate, right? So not only do they have security at the Buddhist Temple of Chicago, they have a gated parking lot. So she's moving this huge metal gate, and I go in, and she says to me, she says, come on in, come on in. She was their recently retired minister. And she said to me, well, here's our sanctuary. Take a picture of the sanctuary. Take a picture of the sanctuary. So I take a picture of the sanctuary. And then she says to me, but come in here. Come in here. There's something else I want to show you. And she takes me to what is, you can see on the far right-hand side, what is basically a closet. It's a large closet, but is actually their crematorium. If you look on the shelves there in the left-hand side of that right-hand picture, you can see the little boxes that contain people's ashes. And she shows me this little tiny altar that is in the closet. And I said, well, what is this altar doing in the closet? And she said, that altar was made in an internment camp during World War II. And what they did was they took whatever materials they had available and tried to create an altar so they could maintain their worship practice even in the internment camps. So of course, I take a picture of it, right? You can see it's time stamped there. I take this picture of it. Then I go back outside, and now the social club thing is started, right? So there's all these people around. So look in the center picture. That's me with these two small Japanese women. I'm only 5'4", but I look really tall in this picture. So the woman in the center, I said, oh my gosh, she just showed me that altar in the closet that was made in the internment camp. And the woman in the middle says to me, oh, yeah, I was in an internment camp. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, I was a little girl. I was 6 years old and I was in the internment camp. And she starts telling me all about how they made these Japanese people work in the lye factories in the soap factories because no one wanted to touch lye. And she said to me, they told us that we weren't trustworthy, and that's why they put us in internment camps. But then they had us working in the munitions factories. Why did they have us working in the munition factories if they didn't trust us? And it was just unbelievable. Then the woman in the yellow shirt comes up, and she says to the other woman, she says, you were in the internment camps? I was in the internment camps too. And so now these two women are talking about their experiences as little girls in the internment camp. But really, what was so amazing about this was this idea that faith communities are resilient, right? And I kind of referred before to the Great Chicago Fire, and many places were burned that I visited. Many places had been burned entirely in the Chicago Fire. But this was a really good example of the resilience of faith and of faith communities, and really the sort of uncanny ability humans have to be resilient and to maintain their faith practices even under really horrible circumstances. So that's my best example of that. This is Edgewater Presbyterian Church, which those of you in Chicago know is in Edgewater. And so the building on the left, or the picture on the left, is the outside of the building. It's this massive building. I mean, if you told me that was a government building, you would believe it, right? It doesn't even barely look like a church. When you go inside, and I was given an hour-long tour by their building manager who knew every nook and cranny of this building. On the right-hand side, you can see the interior. That's their sanctuary. It was really very small, very simple. It's a lot of wood, so it smells like really, really old wood. But that entire building is being used. They rent to people in need. They rent to nonprofits. They rent to a theater group. There's been Boy Scout troops in there for like the last 100 years. And so this was a really good example of how faith communities are part of the broader community. I cannot tell you how many faith communities I went to, how many places of worship I went to, that also have a soup kitchen or are involved in a program for people who are unhoused. Many of these places of worship are intimately involved with their neighborhood and with their community. And Edgewater Presbyterian was just sort of one example of that. And this next one, if I can get this to go. Okay, there's my friend Nadim. So on the far left picture, you can see the Downtown Islamic Center, and that was, I think, on the 4th floor, was the prayer space on the 4th floor. And then that's Nadim and me. He's my friend now. But one of the things that was interesting is how adaptable faith communities are, right? So in the case of the Downtown Islamic Center, as I already told you, right, they have these 5 narrow stories. And so they've just learned how to deal with that, right? They've learned how to create sacred spaces on these different stories. But one of the places I really wanted to visit was this place on the right. It's called Masjid Tabak. And what you can see above there is Tabak is a restaurant. And it's a restaurant that serves mostly Middle Eastern, but they can be anywhere. It serves Muslim drivers in Chicago. So a lot of drivers who work for Uber or Lyft or, driving services, cab services, whatever, they want to have a place to pray. And so they can go to, there's a bunch of them in the Chicago area. They can go to the restaurant and they can eat. And then downstairs, there's a masjid. And I said to Nadim, I said, hey, what's the deal with all these restaurants that are also masjids? And he said, oh, you can go. You can go if you want to. And I said, really? Are you sure? He's like, yeah, just go, just go. So I went to this one. I walked in that door that you see there. I walked in the door there. I was the only white person in there, but I was also the only woman in there. And there was some guys sitting in the window, and I explained to them I was getting my Guinness World Record. And they're like, yeah, we'll sign the form. And they told me I could go downstairs and see the masjid space, which I did. But the idea here, these are really good examples of how in many, many cases, we humans create the sacred space. And we find ways to do that, and we find places to do that. And humans are very creative, and there's a lot of ingenuity involved. So, and this was what I told you before, St. Andrew's Greek Orthodox Church. On the far left, you can see their sanctuary. So it's a very typical Orthodox church in some ways. And those are very beautiful. But they were having this blessing of the waters. And so he says to me, oh, it's going to be on Saturday. You can come if you want to. So I said, okay. So what we did was there in Lincoln Park. And so we just left the church, and you can see that we followed followed a procession, right? There's a kid with the cross, and we just followed the procession, and we went all the way down to Lake Michigan, down to the beach. And when we got down to the beach, there was this table, this altar table, and there were three Greek Orthodox priests, and they did this little blessing of the waters. And then if you look in the center picture, you can see, they're literally blessing the waters. But if you look at the two bottom pictures, then what they did for the kids was they threw a cross out into Lake Michigan, and then the kids had to race out and get it. And so I don't know if you can see, there's a little circle on the right-hand side. You can see the little cross that they threw out. And so it was I just happened to be there when they were doing it, and it was a really fun event. And it was a great multi-generational event too. It was a really good way to see how different faith communities bring their children along in the tradition. So I just thought there was a few things that would be fun to show you. That's it. That was my little slideshow.
Well, thank you so much. That was really wonderful and really inspiring. I'm sure you have many, many, many more stories, and I hope we get a chance to hear about them sometime later.
Yeah, I have like 140 more, but you probably don't need to hear them all.
Well, we really, really appreciate that you shared with us tonight. And we're going to finish with a little bit of meditation on this beautiful theme of breaking boundaries and seeing each other as human beings who have lots and lots in common with us. But first, I want to mention some upcoming events we have.
Can I just say one more thing, Mary? So Mary has my email address. And so if anybody wants to reach out to me, again, I'm at World Religions #4, World Religions for Kids. So you can contact me through my website, but you can also ask Mary. I'm happy to chat with people. And so yeah, please feel free to reach out in the future if you're interested.
You can
Now,
also put it in the chat. Can you do that?
yeah, I can.
Okay, and while you're doing that, Anka, you can spotlight me instead so she doesn't have to be online while she's doing that.
Thank you.
New upcoming events. As many of you know, we have guided meditation, both online and in person, every Monday through Friday at 12 noon and at 7 p.m. And the third Sunday of every month, we have 1 hour of meditation for world peace. All of the Brahma Kumaris centers all over the world do this from 6:30 to 7:30 in their time zone on the third Sunday of each month. And our workshop for the month of April, as it is traditionally, is going to be for Earth Day. So we're having our Earth Day program on Saturday, April 18th, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It will include lunch, and it's unfortunately, for those of you who are outside of the Chicago area, it's in person only. But we will have more Zoom programs like this coming up, probably have one in May. And if you would like to receive announcements, we send out emails every 2 weeks of upcoming events. And you can sign up for that on our website, which is BK Metro Chicago. And you can also see all of our upcoming events, and you can get Zoom links on BK Metro Chicago. I'm inspired now to have some kind of a interfaith exchange. I had this thought in the month of February because it was the International Interfaith Month, but I went to India and couldn't actualize it then. But we'll see. Anybody has any suggestions? You can let me know, and we'll see what kind of interfaith encounters we can organize and experience together. And we'll finish now with a meditation to take us all into this experience of universal brotherhood and tap into these feelings. We genuinely have curiosity about each other. We want to know, we want to understand, we want to relate to each other. And so we'll set the scene for this within our own consciousness. To begin with, Take a few deep, easy breaths. Watch the air as it enters and leaves the lungs. Notice how quiet and easy the breath is. And as you watch the breath, let the mind become quiet and easy and light. Bring your awareness now to the seat of consciousness behind the third eye point. The conscious being, the soul, resides there invisibly. And we could say the soul is consciousness, but also a being of goodness. Each soul is endowed with the energy of peace and love. And we each feel a sense of belonging to the human family. Many experiences in life put up boundaries. We don't always know how to cross them. At the level of consciousness, there are no boundaries. See yourself, the soul, as a tiny being of light, pure, peaceful, joyful, wise. And now, for a moment, see all of the billions of human souls. Don't look at the bodies for a moment, but just see them all as billions of little sparkling stars all over the world, just like you, just like the souls of your family members and your friends and the people on your work team. At the level of the soul, we're all little sparkling lights. And see every one of them as a being of peace. And love. Bliss. And wisdom. Without the bodies, we can't tell what religion they belong to, or what nationality they belong to, or what political party they belong to. We're all beings of goodness. We all have a sense of belonging. And when we see each other as souls, there are no boundaries. And so to all of the billions of members of our human family, send your good wishes. May all beings everywhere be peaceful, May all beings everywhere feel loved and accepted and respected. May all beings everywhere be given the opportunity to contribute. Under normal circumstances, we see people and recognize them on the basis of the body, but we can understand that inside each body there is a soul. We're all members of the same family. And we all have the same spiritual parent. And parents love each one of their children immeasurably. And of course, the children love the parents as well. We're all children of one God. We all connect with or pray to or worship the same being who is a being of goodness, absolute goodness, a being of unconditional love for everyone, everywhere. A being who is eternally peaceful. A being who shines a light on all of us souls so that we might see our own core of peace and love and joy. Choose these qualities for ourselves and share them with each other. And even if we don't know people of other religions, we don't talk to people of other religions, we can share our love and our good wishes. And especially with those who feel threatened because of their religion. May all people of all religions live together in peace. Om Shanti. Once again, thank you, Vicki, for meeting with us and sharing with us your amazing experiences. And Ankit, you can bring Vicki back now. Sharing your amazing experiences and sharing your wisdom that you learned. And really, thank you for your open heart. I'm inspired by your courage and your attitude of curiosity and your optimism, because I think those qualities together have really predestined your success.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming and listening and sharing. I really appreciate it. I know everyone's busy, so just great. And thank you for that meditation. You said you were going to do a meditation based on what I said, and now I wish I had said it all a little bit differently, but maybe next time.
Oh, you said it perfectly.
So did you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.